As fighting intensifies, Israel strikes a Gaza building that hosts the AP and other news outlets. An Israeli airstrike destroys a high-rise building in Gaza City that housed the offices of the Associated Press and Al Jazeera on Saturday. The worst violence between Israelis and Palestinians in 7 years intensified on Saturday as protests erupted again in the occupied West Bank, and an Israeli airstrike destroyed a prominent high-rise building in Gaza City that housed media outlets including the Associated Press and Al Jazeera. The Israel Defense Forces said its fighter jets struck the media tower because it also contained military assets belonging to Hamas. The IDF said it had provided advance warning to civilians in the building to allow evacuation. Gary Pruitt, the chief executive of the AP, said he was shocked and horrified by the destruction of the building. The news agency was seeking information from the Israeli government, he said on Twitter. The Biden administration has communicated directly to the Israelis that ensuring the safety and security of journalists and independent media is a paramount responsibility, Jen Psaki, the White House press secretary, said on Twitter. As fighting intensified and protests broke out anew in the West Bank, a senior American envoy, Hadi Amr, arrived in Jerusalem to help broker a ceasefire. Mr. Amr, the United States Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Israel and Palestinian Affairs, was scheduled to meet with senior Israeli and Palestinian officials in Jerusalem and the West Bank. But while Hamas and Israeli officials signaled late Friday that they were open to discussing a ceasefire, fighting continued unabated for much of Saturday, even as American, Egyptian and Qatari attempted to negotiate a pause in fighting. An Israeli airstrike overnight killed at least 10 members of an extended family in a refugee camp in Gaza, after which Hamas militants aimed another round of rockets at Tel Aviv. Demonstrations broke out again in the West Bank on Saturday, Nakba Day, an annual commemoration of the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from their homes in 1948. In Ramallah, the administrative center of the West Bank, a siren sounded for 73 seconds to mark the years since the dispersal. The protests in the West Bank illustrated how widespread the confrontation has become since Hamas fired its first rockets shortly after 6 p.m. on Monday. The health ministry in Gaza said that at least 139 people had died in Israeli airstrikes and shelling, 39 of them children, with about 1,000 injured. Those numbers could not be independently verified. The United Nations said 10,000 Gazans had left their homes to take shelter in schools, mosques and other places. In Israel, the hostilities have left 7 civilians, including a 5-year-old boy, and 1 soldier dead. Power in Gaza is down to 5 hours a day in some places, and water comes out of the pipes only once every few days. Any efforts to contain what had been a worsening coronavirus infection crisis all but ceased. In Israel, the always fraught notion of coexistence between Arabs and Jews seemed to be cracking amid the burning apartments and synagogues, the thrown stones and homemade bombs. The crisis has pushed concerns about Israel's political gridlock off the table and could benefit the shaky career of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, while also giving momentum to Hamas.